Welcome to Storytime, brought to you by the OWSCyCon2019, the online book event of the year. Where to, kid? The driver grunted. Bianca fell back against the taxi's worn seats with a bone-weary sigh. The lingering sense of perfume and cheap vodka wafted through the compartment, courtesy of the drunken couple stumbling towards the next bar. Bianca sneezed. She hated drunk people. As she ran her fingers through her tangled hair, she noticed the driver watching her from his rearview mirror. His eyes roved up and down, taking her in, though there wasn't much to see. Then again, when did that ever matter to a guy? Gaunt cheeks, tattered clothes, and dark bags that swallowed her green eyes weren't exactly what she'd call sexy. But his gaze became less hungrily appraising and more concerned. Where to? He repeated, less gruff this time. Huh? Oh, Bianca bit her lip, thinking. It wasn't a simple answer. She tried to breathe him in to see what he was, but the cacophony of scents in the taxi made that near impossible. Bianca had trusted the wrong people before, even if he did seem genuine, and the idea of ending up at the end of a hunter's gun almost made her add her own vomit to the list of unpleasant smells. Well? The Purple Door District. The man turned and glanced back at her with a frown. Never heard of it. Her heart sank. It was probably stupid to assume she'd find another parahuman. Bianca shook her head in frustration, then reached into her pocket, pulling out a 20. Take me as far as this will get me. The man eyed the bill. You in trouble, kid? No. Bianca shook it at him. Look, can you drive me somewhere or not? The driver stared a moment longer, then turned back around with a shrug. Yeah, sure. Buckle up, kid. Bianca snuggled into the back seat, trying to ignore the spring poking her in the thigh. It didn't matter. Anywhere was better than being drenched out in the cold. The heat hissed as it turned up another notch. Her hands gravitated towards it, drinking in the warmth as it thawed her frozen limbs. As her tension ebbed, her eyes started to flutter. How many days had passed since she'd slept for more than a few hours? Most nights she rested in the park, on a bench, and sometimes on top of a roof when she changed forms. One eye always open. Shifting for a werebird like her came as easy as breathing, unlike for other parahumans. But with an empty belly it left her feeling weak and helpless, and right now she couldn't afford to be helpless. She reached into her mind and touched her sleepy caracara. The bird, a reflection of her soul, shuffled around and twitched her dark wings as she got comfortable. Bianca sensed every movement, like the way she tucked her beak into her wing, and the exhaustion from spending so many nights out in the open, exposed to the elements. No other lichen had such a connection to an inner animal. She was the bird, and the bird was her. The bond made avians special. It made them feel a little less alone. But it had its drawbacks too. When you went from having your bird and another avian's bird in your head, flying, preening, and comforting your soul's connection to nothing, it created an abyss. Sometimes Bianca thought she could hear the haunting echo of her sister's caracara in the depths of the night, but then she'd wake up to the ghostly sound alone. She'd cried more tears than she cared to count over the repeated heartbreak. Bianca opened her eyes to a watery vision. She scrubbed them stubbornly, then slipped her fingers into her tattered jacket and pulled out her phone. The sudden bright light made her blink rapidly until she could focus on the home screen. Two warm, beige-skinned Latina women smiled at her in a partial embrace. The picture brought back memories of an art contest Bianca had won a year ago. They wore matching purple necklaces with a silver feather charm, a necklace Bianca still wore. Her sister Nora looked so proud, her green eyes gleaming, her rosy cheeks full of life. Her caracara keened in grief, shaking Bianca to her core and threatening even more tears. Bianca's stomach twisted, and she closed the phone, turning to the sights of the taxi window for distraction. The Chicago skyline gleamed beyond a window rippling with rain. The glow of street and building lights soothed her. She didn't want to fall asleep, but between the light and the warmth and the soft seat, her eyes fluttered and she dozed off. Ricardo called about a missing avian. Yeah? You have a description of her? Bianca didn't open her eyes as the voice stirred her awake. The car jostled beneath her. The seatbelt was fastened and the heat still on, so she hadn't been moved. The taxi driver spoke quietly, but she had better hearing than most humans. She swallowed hard and hid her trembling hands in her pockets. That's what I thought. No, Ricardo told me to watch out for a kid around this area. Said she was of interest. Said he'd pay good. He shifted, and Bianca gave a little snore. Yeah, it looks like her. Yeah, okay, not far from the drop-off point. Look, don't get blood on my cab this time. Hard to explain that, okay? I'll be there soon. Tell Ricardo he better have the money. Bianca's heart pounded in her chest as she heard the call end. Dear mother, they'd found her again. She thought she'd been careful this time. It had been days since the last encounter, and she'd even travelled to a different state. She swallowed a lump in her throat, every muscle sparking with stress. She'd come this far. She refused to let herself be captured by a human taxi driver. Would running help? Or was it better to fight her way out? Why couldn't she be a were-dog or a were-cat? They were stronger than werebirds. But no, she had wings, not teeth. At least avians had speed. She cracked open an eye. Streetlights flickered past and she could see townhouses and apartment complexes on the side of the road. Shops and cataracts were few and far between. Bianca reached slowly towards her seatbelt. She clicked it free, then froze, waiting. But the driver said nothing. He played a quiet song on the radio which would have lulled her back to sleep if her heart hadn't been jackhammering in her chest. The taxi's brakes squeaked as they pulled up to a red light. Bianca counted to 3, pulled the door handle, and shoved it open. "Hey!" the driver shouted. Bianca fell out of the car in her haste, gashing her knees on asphalt. The driver slammed his door behind him, but she didn't look back. She scrambled to her feet and darted through the cars, running faster than a human possibly could. Landmarks blurred past her, and the wind whipped her face as if she soared through the night sky. She didn't stop running until her legs began to burn with the effort. Bianca slowed near an alleyway, gasping for breath. Rats skittered out of dumpsters and waddled through the rain puddles. Each sound sent another jolt of adrenaline through her, but still, she couldn't bring herself to continue. She sank to her knees, her entire body trembling from exhaustion. If her sister couldn't outrun hunters, what hope did she have? She couldn't even trust a taxi driver. "Stop it!" she snapped at herself, her caracara squawking in agreement. She wasn't a quitter. Bianca gripped the rosary-like necklace and ran her thumb over the purple glass beads several times. It helped to draw on the strength of both the saints and the Blessed Mother. She remembered spending nights memorizing and reciting the prayers alongside Nora, their first communion and their acceptance into the church. It had always brought her comfort, grounded her at the hardest times. Nora wouldn't want her to give up. Bianca rocked back on her heels and looked around. There was no sign of the taxi driver, or any of the men who'd been following her for weeks. Bianca gripped the side of a wall and pulled herself up. Water dripped from her bloody knees and left a small trail as she headed down the alley. Rain pattered on her head and made the dumpster smell even more rancid than the cab. As she ran, she searched frantically for a purple door, or anything that might signify safety for a parahuman. Nora said I could find one somewhere here. Where is it? And if the men knew she was looking for it, would they surround all the Purple Door District buildings? She pressed on, moving through the nearby streets. The shops were all locked up with iron bars or grates over the windows and doors. Some buildings bore broken glass and for sale signs that had lost their colour over the long months of waiting for a new tenant. It was not a good part of town, just her luck. But she wouldn't expect hunters to live somewhere good. The minutes and rain ticked and dripped on as she slowed to a walk on her sore feet. Water ate through her shoes and made her blisters ache. By the time she reached the next intersection, she started to limp. Bianca sighed and pulled out her phone. Not for the first time, she typed in Purple Door District in Chicago into the search engine. Nothing of consequence came up until she clicked on the images and saw a picture of a little Airbnb with an iconic purple flower pot hanging directly over the same coloured door. When she checked the link, she saw that it had been posted by a woman named Gladus with the letters PPD following her name. Purple Door District. Bianca couldn't help but hesitate. She smelled a trap. What if the hunters were lying in wait? Do I have much of a choice? She wondered. She checked the address and put it in the maps feature. She almost sobbed with relief when she saw that it was only a few blocks from where she currently stood. Locking in the location, she started to run. Running soon turned to hobbling. Cars zipped past and splashed her with water, but she didn't care. She watched the little icon on her screen move closer and closer to the Airbnb. 10 minutes. 5 minutes. Bianca looked up and caught sight of the purple flower pot in the distance. A warm light in the front window beckoned her, promising safety and reprieve. Even if the beacon didn't belong to a district saviour, hopefully the owner would be willing to let in a bedraggled stranger, just for a... Something hit the back of her leg, cutting through fabric and skin. Bianca pitched forward with a cry of surprise and collapsed. She smacked hard against the sidewalk, her phone cracking as it struck the corner of the curb. She reached down her calf, whimpering, and fingered a dart in her thigh. She barely felt the pinprick mark over the ache of poison inside it. Henbane, a toxin meant to render avians helpless. Her vision blurred. Her legs burned like 100 red ants were burrowing into her veins. She looked over her shoulder and saw 2 men running towards her, the same 2 hunters who had been tracking her for the past 3 weeks. The larger of the 2 was a broad-shouldered white man with a brown beard, flecked with frost. His thinner Hispanic companion bore dark hair and eyes as sharp as a raptor despite being human. No, Bianca groaned. She cast aside the dart and grabbed the light post beside her. Grimacing, she pulled herself up and hobbled towards the building. The pain in her leg burned worse, and her vision faded in and out, pulsing black at the edges to the tempo of her heartbeat. The flower pot. She had to reach the purple flower pot. Bianca hit the steps and struggled up to the door. She pounded on it with both fists. "Help! Please!" she screamed. She looked back as the hunters closed in. The bearded man pulled his gun out again and aimed at her. The door wrenched open. A tall woman with beautiful ebony skin stepped out onto the porch where Bianca huddled. She stood nearly 6 foot tall, her chin raised with pride and strength. The colours of the rainbow swathed her body, her hair pulled up in layers of purple and crimson cloth. Her gaze swept towards the man with the gun, and she held out her hand. "She's on my property now, gentlemen. PDD." but the men didn't listen and approached the stairs. "We want no trouble," the bearded one said. He took another step forward. The woman moved in front of Bianca and raised her hand. A wall of water suddenly sprang up between the hunters and their prey, driving them backward. Bianca rolled onto her back, watching in wonder as the rain coalesced into a waving, living creature. It arched over the men and formed into a clawed hand. Water dripped from the fingers like venom. "I won't tell you again," the woman growled. She flexed her fingers, causing the watery apparition to do the same. The bearded man hesitated, but the second trained his gun on Bianca. The woman waved her arm. The watery hand snatched both men in its cold embrace. The fingers closed, squeezing. The second man's gun clattered to the pavement. She lifted them several feet into the air, winding the water around them until only their eyes and noses were exposed. "You come back to my home, and I'll bring the Legion down on both of your heads." With a jerk of her hand, she sent the two men flying across the road. They hit the ground with a painful thud which could have broken a rib, just as they had done to Bianca not moments ago. Bianca felt no sympathy for them. In fact, she hardly felt anything at all as the henbane consumed her senses like a hungry beast and the cold blanketed her body. She looked up at her rescuer and slumped down on the porch, her strength fading with each passing moment. She caught a glimpse of the woman reaching for her, and then darkness descended. This story time was read by Timothy Bateson and brought to you in conjunction with the OWSCyCon 2019. OWSCyCon runs from May 17th through May 19th. You can find us at OWSCyCon.ourrightside.com. Again, OWSCyCon.ourrightside.com. We have events happening across all genres. If you are a reader, you cannot afford to miss this event. You never know. You may just find your next best read.